On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, what are the ripple effects for this roster and the draft after the Thunder trade for Alex Caruso?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and Inside the Thunder beat writer Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. On today's show, we're talking about the ripple effects from the Alex Caruso trade. How does this impact the NBA draft? What will you look for now after this move? And how good does this make the Thunder? We're joined by a very special guest, Daily Thunder beat writer, radio extraordinaire, DJ, everything under the sun, sharp shooter especially. Brandon Rahbar, how are you doing today?
I am great. That, of all the things that you introduced me as, I think sharpshooter is my favorite. Like, forget about all the job stuff. If you call me a sharpshooter, I'm good.
You are the actual best player on the beat, despite what Daniel Bell will say. We'll take the floor spacing in the modern era of basketball anytime over a post-up Dirk fade merchant that can't play defense. So, Brandon, the Thunder made a trade, and that's what we have to dive into first. Shockingly, on Thursday, they do the rare 1-for-1 swap, putting Josh Giddey in Chicago, the Windy City, and bringing Alex Caruso to Oklahoma City, back where it all started. Brandon, what was your just initial reaction to seeing that notification from Woj?
I mean, surprise was the first reaction, because the NBA Finals just happened, and we're kind of conditioned to wait until the NBA draft to expect those Woj bombs and to expect, trades to go down and all those things. So I was surprised. I thought about telling you what I was doing because it actually connects. I'll tell you, Rylan, actually. I'll just share this with you. I haven't shared this with anybody else. Not even my wife knows this. I'm only going to share this because, I do have a connection with Josh Giddey with the whole did you poop question, right?
Right.
So that happened before the Thunder ever drafted him, like a week before. I'm not kidding you. I was literally changing my same kid's poop diaper when I got the Woj notification. And so I had to hurriedly finish up and get back to the get to my phone and shoot out some tweets. But that's literally what I was doing. My son.
So your kid was shooting stuff out. You were shooting stuff out. There's just a lot going on. It comes full circle.
That's what it felt like. That's what it felt like. I don't know if you need to censor this episode of Locked On Thunder or anything like that. So I apologize for making this PG-13. But no, I was surprised. But my initial reaction for the Thunder is that this is a great trade. Like, seriously, I do believe that Josh Giddey is still a good player. I think that this was a win-win trade because the Bulls get a 21-year-old with a lot of potential, a lot of upside. I think we all realize that Josh has a lot of skills. They just don't fit well with what the Thunder have. The Thunder need the ball to be in Shai's hands and to be in J-Dub's hands as much as possible. And Josh Giddey needs the ball in his hands to excel. You flip that, a good player for a player who is one of the best defenders in the entire league in Alex Caruso. And he's a guy that shot 41% from three on 5 attempts per game. I think it's an instant upgrade and a difference maker for the Thunder.
It is going to be just fascinating to see how it all goes down. Now, the 1-for-1 part was shocking. I just thought that there was rarely going to be 1-for-1 trades in the new era of the NBA. I think that this move gives the Thunder the best defense in the NBA. Would you agree with that? Like, this is the best defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's either the Thunder, the Celtics, or the Wolves, but it's a conversation now. It's one of the three. I think it'll be the Thunder because you're adding Caruso to a team that was already a top 5 defense. So, yeah, I think the Thunder, especially depending on what they do, for the rest of the offseason. But potentially, yes, I do agree this can be the best defense in the entire league.
And then excluding Boston, I think that what this really does is it sets up. So you take the top 3 players. Like, you're going to need a good core to do anything in this league. Like, you're going to need the nucleus of a guy like Shai, who's a top 5 guy in the league. And then you have 2 rising stars in Chet and J-Dub, who they're clearly on that trajectory of being all-star plus players. Whatever you can get past that all-star level from either one of those guys, or from both of them, if it just works out exceptionally well. When you're trying to build around that, this trade makes this core group, the complementary pieces, the best supporting cast in the NBA in the Western Conference. Like, Boston is Boston, but like, who is supporting their stars better than OKC right now?
Yeah, that's the thing. This makes a deep Thunder team even deeper. And, you bring up Boston, and I was kind of going down. There are a lot of similarities. Obviously, Boston champions for a reason. They have the top end talent with Tatum and Brown and Porzingis, but they also had that depth. And if you go by kind of player by player, it's a little interesting to see the similarities with Boston, because you can compare SGA and Tatum, both of them MVP candidates. You can compare Jaylen Brown and J-Dub, like the second scorer who can score, really at an elite level, but also provide defense and provide some other playmaking. You got the stretch bigs that can protect the paint, and Chet and Porzingis. Then you add a guy like Caruso, who I think we saw this take on Twitter a lot, and I agree with it. It's kind of like a Derek White type trade, going out and getting a Caruso. He can kind of be your Derek White type player. You got there are already comparisons between Lou Dort and Drew Holiday. So, I mean, when you kind of go down, it gets kind of interesting to see, I see that the Thunder have the top end talent, but they also have the depth. Now they just need their Al Horford, I guess.
Yeah, they need their Al Horford. I think that, the Derek White thing was all over Twitter yesterday. Like, Michael Martin, Derek Parker, Joel Ernst even called me, and I cannot stand whenever Joel calls. It's going to be just a lathering rant for 20 minutes. Oh my gosh, that guy. But everyone's making that same comparison. And I think that, this trade signifies, okay, the Thunder are in. Like, they're at the table. You've ushered out the gotta be patient, gotta wait and see, gotta develop, gotta see how good these guys can be. And you've welcomed now in it from this point forward through the core's career, like as long as Chet, J-Dub, and Shai are in Oklahoma City, from this point forward, your goal is to win a championship. And that's the expectation level on this team with this trade. And yet, while that's the case, you'll still see Shai, Chet, and J-Dub get a lot better. And they're going to continue to develop. But in general, the team's expectation and what's casted upon them and predicted upon them will be that of championship contenders. And so this trade, I think, signified the flipping of that switch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, I think that everybody this past season and even the season before, it's like, oh, when are the Thunder going to cash in their chips? When are they going to go all in? Like, all these kind of statements about the Thunder and questioning what they're going to do with all these assets. What's crazy is this is a trade that helps them win now, absolutely puts them in title contention. I do think that Alex Caruso is a difference maker like that, because like you said, Shai, Chet, and J-Dub are only going to get better. Internal development, Case and Wallace is going to get better. Like, they're so young, they're going to get better. So it raises the ceiling. It raises the floor. I just think that this trade is absolutely a deal where you go out and get a difference maker, but you didn't really have to use that many assets. You used Josh Giddey, obviously, and he was an asset. He was the guy that was linked, whenever you see trade machine, mock trades, and all that stuff, Josh Giddey was always included. But to go out and get Alex Caruso and to make your rotation stronger, both defensively and from a shooting standpoint, and make the fit that much better, and you didn't have to give up a single pick, not a first-round pick, not a second-round pick. Like, the Thunder still have all these assets. They improved. They're going to improve internally, and they still have all those picks, and they have all this cap space.
They have a core that's good enough with a bevy of draft picks and top 5 in the league cap space that you can play around with and get creative with, up until these extensions kick in. So with that being said, how aggressive do you expect the Thunder will be this summer? And has this trade changed anything about the draft? We'll talk about that coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Check out FanDuel today, because FanDuel, you can get new customers right now. You new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with the winning of any $5 bet. That's $200 if you win your $5 bet on anything from Major League Baseball. They also have the WNBA. You can still bet on the NBA. Even though the finals are over, they still have some fantastic options at America's number one sportsbook with the future bets. So the Thunder have top 5 championship odds to take home the award. They've actually moved up a little bit from where they last were, sitting right now presently at exactly 5. They also have Shea as the top 3 in MVP. And could they draft Bronny James? FanDuel gives the Thunder odds to do that. So you can check it out today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Brandon, I know you're cranking stuff out for Daily Thunder. I'm sure you've been ringing off the hook, getting on radio interview after radio interview, which at least someone is on the airwaves there, Brandon. Whenever you look at this trade, and you're a draft guy, just like myself, we had a draft pod on the Dream Team podcast earlier this week. Does this trade mess with the draft strategy at all for the Thunder? We're going to get into that coming up. But right now, just as a quick aside, we mentioned how this trade flips the switch and it makes them look more like contenders. How aggressive do you think the Thunder will be, whether it is in Wednesday's draft or it is in free agency or it is on the trade market? Do you think that the Thunder have made their big move, or is another big move coming, or is it going to be kind of an in-between move or no move?
No, that's a good question. I think that's what most Thunder fans are wondering right now. I expect, maybe a move. I would say an in-between move. I was going to say maybe a move kind of comparable to this one, but I do think this is a big move. So maybe not quite this big. That's how highly I think of Caruso. And, Josh Giddey has kind of been a staple of this Thunder team and of the rebuild. He was that first pick in the rebuild. So I do think that this may be the biggest move, but I do think that there are, say, medium-sized moves to come. I don't expect like a KD move, a Paul George move, anything like that, like some huge blockbuster. But I do think that the Thunder will go out, whether it's to get a starting for, like whether or not Caruso is going to start and he just takes Giddey's place. Like that's a whole nother conversation. And it's a good debate. I could see that going either way. So maybe they go out and get a starting for and Caruso comes off the bench. I do think absolutely they'll get a backup 5. I think we all know that the Thunder won all the Chet minutes. It's when Chet sat against the Mavs. For all the talk about needing to move Chet to the 4, that's not going to happen. He's going to be the starting 5. But I do think that they need a paint protector at the 5. So I think that we'll see a move like that. And then maybe a starting 4 also. I think they have 1 or 2 moves left in them. We'll say medium aggression, Rylan.
I like that. I think that they'll be aggressive in the sense of they'll explore every option. But what will materialize, I would agree that they're gonna use this cap space and draft capital and these 4 open roster spots. They're gonna use them to the best of their ability. I really believe that whenever the dust settles, August 1, after the offseason is wrapped up for the most part traditionally in the NBA, when the dust settles, you'll think that this team is dramatically improved from the night that the season ended in Dallas. So that's going to be a really good thing for Oklahoma City. Whether it be a perfect roster, you can never create a perfect roster. But speaking of the Caruso starting debate, I've been having that debate since the trade went down. I think that they're just going to put Caruso in the starting lineup in place of Giddey, even as I just said that they're going to still bolster their roster and improve it and fill their holes and their front court rotation. I would agree that they're not going to make a move like Durant or George. I'd be pretty shocked if they did that. It'd be a welcome shock, but I'd be pretty shocked if they did that. So without doing that, I don't really see who you go get that you start over Caruso, especially as Sam is already highlighting how, despite his lack of height, he can really guard up in size. So I think that they might just start that lineup of Shea, Caruso, Dort, Dub, and Chet. Where do you fall? Like, if you had to just place a dollar wager, I'll buy you a Starbucks if you're right and I'm wrong or whatever on this bet.
Ooh, if I get a Starbucks, that's way better than $1. I would, like, if I were to put my percentages, I would only put it like 55% positive as opposed to 45% going the other way. But I would guess Caruso comes off the bench and they get a starting 4, whether that's, free agency or a trade. I don't think it'll be in the draft. I think where they draft at 12, I'd be shocked if it's a guy that starts at the 4. It just doesn't make much sense who they could possibly be drafting on this team at this point. I just don't see it. But that said, I think that you hit a key note that Sam Presti hit on. He said that Alex Caruso defends bigger wings in an extraordinary way. So that does kind of clue us in that maybe, if they can see him defending guys like Kevin Durant and Paul George, if the Thunder aren't going to go out and get those guys, maybe you can put Alex Caruso on those guys and guard him. And what they get somebody else, I think that's an upgrade. If you just switch Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey, yes, there's a downgrade in size, which I think every Thunder fan wants to see more size. The rebounding takes a little bit of hit, but what you get defensively and what you get shooting, I think makes the starting lineup that much better. So I could see it. 45% sure, but I will disagree and try to get my Starbucks and say that they get a starting 4 somewhere else.
Yeah, and I don't think that either answer at this moment is wrong, because you can totally see the value of bringing Caruso off the bench. And as the Thunder have also pointed out with Mark consistently, like, the starters don't really matter that much. Like, you could still close with Caruso and Dort and like go all in on defense if that's what you need. But coming off the bench, you can tap into more of that playmaking that he offers. They want to do that with Case and some as well. So you can still see where he'd be valuable either direction. I just happen to think that they're going to start him, but we'll see how things go. You mentioned next week's draft. It's been overshadowed a little bit now that the Caruso trade went down, but whenever you look at the draft, does anything change for you after this trade? Because I think that like 2 weeks ago, if we did our draft pod, we would have been talking about Devin Carter and Jared McCain and like some of these guys that I really, really, really like. And I could see it, and not to have a cop-out, but like I could see it going either way, where like the Thunder just continue to lean into this draft is independent of what our team is looking like. Like, the whole goal of the draft is to draft the best player and then figure it out later, whether that is just him becoming a trade chip or it is him becoming a really good fit with the roster, or the fact that, like, yeah, you have Case and Dort and Caruso, but if you have Devin Carter, like, that's just even more defense and shooting that you can never have enough of, and it gives you even more of a palatability to trade one of those other guys in a massive deal should you want to do that later on. I could also see, hey, now it's the perfect time to go get someone else, like in a different mold than one of those guards that we really like. So where do you fall on if this shakes up the Thunder's draft strategy at all?
Yeah, I do think that Jared McCain, Devin Carter specifically, those were the two guys I was looking at when it comes to guards. Maybe Bub Carrington would be in consideration. Now, I do think it changes the draft in some sort of ways. Like, I would be surprised now. Now, again, if Sam Presti in the front office has McCain or Carrington or Devin Carter at the top of the board and they feel like they're the best guy, they'll probably just draft him. That said, when you're going to be playing SGA, Dort, Caruso, Case and Wallace, Isaiah Joe, I mean, that's a lot of guards that are like 6'5" and under, 6'6" and under. You would think that, with the options they'll have, whether it's DaRon Holmes, Khalil Ware, I don't know if we want to get into these names yet, if that's a spoiler. Guys like that, Ron Holland, even some of those guys, you would think that, size would kind of leapfrog guards in the pecking order now of priorities. That said, one dark horse when it comes to guards I could still see being really high on the priority list would be Nikola Topic. just because his value could be so high to get him at 12 when he was like a top 3 to 5 guy, and you could just redshirt him for a year and not worry about it. And then you got him, for the future. He's a guy that I could see still being, someone that the Thunder take despite him being a guard.
Yeah, that will be an interesting name. And so coming up, we're going to see if you can run it back and predict the pick perfectly as you did last year and talk about our favorite draft names in this class. But before we do, Brandon, going to tell you about our good friends over at eBay Motors. They are fantastic. They're great. They understand that passion drives patience. That's the formula for winning a championship. It's also the formula for keeping your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for at eBay's Guaranteed Fit. It's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're going to be burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to find your car, the MVP, and make it bring home a huge win for you. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit. Available only for U.S. customers. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Brandon, last year you called this pick perfectly, talking about Cason Wallace. At the same time, the Saturday before the draft, you called this pick perfectly. We're going to see if you can do that again. Now, there are some interesting names floating around, and to put a bow on our last segment, I think that the draft strategy, the draft board shuffles around. All things created equally, you might lean more into like a DaRon Holmes now than you would a Devin Carter. But I don't think that this move completely closes off, as you mentioned. Like if Ron Holland slips to 12, yeah, he's got a G in his position column. If Ron Holland's at 12, you better go get him. He's the number one player on a lot of people's board, including myself, Derek Parker. It's like a lot of us really like Ron Holland. If he's there at 12, I don't care that his position says G, F, C, B for basketball player. I don't care what it said. You go get Ron Holland. So I could see that happening. You mentioned like the pure value of a guy like Topic. That would be very interesting as well. But barring any of those guys like truly slipping to 12, I think that you're in that Holmes, Tidjane Salaun, type of category. And, Khalil Ware's interesting. Zach Edey will be a fan favorite for most people. But right now, before the draft, take your swing. Who's it going to be?
It is tough this year. And I've been a fan of DaRon Holmes for a long time. Derek Parker, like a few months ago, asked me who's my guy in this draft. And I said it was DaRon Holmes. I'm getting a little wary because like Javoni and Wu and Wasserman, like they just released like their new big boards, and they got DaRon Holmes in the second round, which I just do not understand whatsoever at all. So my heart says DaRon Holmes, but my head says Ron Holland. I think he's going to slip. For a while, I was saying Cody Williams, but all the latest intel says that he's going to go top 10. Unless the Thunder make a move up, I don't think that's going to happen. Also, I picked DaRon Holmes on one other podcast, so this way I kind of like divvy up my share so I can be right in one of them. Last year it was Cason Wallace everywhere. Anytime I was asked, it was Cason Wallace. I'm less sure this year, so I'll split it and I'll say DaRon Holmes half the time. And on Locked On Thunder, I'm going with Ron Holland.
Well, let me tell you, I know you're a very busy guy, so this is an offer that's on the table for you. I don't know if it can work with your schedule, but because I'm a huge Ron Holland fan, number one on my board, because this would then be 2 years in a row, and because this draft specifically is impossible to predict because we don't even have consensus at the very top. Like the tippity top of this draft does not have consensus. So it's impossible to get down to 12. If you're right and the Thunder select Ron Holland Saturday for the intro presser, I'm going to bring you a Starbucks. And then afterward, I'm going to take you out to a steakhouse dinner after the presser. So you get 2 for 1 on Saturday as payback, because I would be overjoyed if Ron Holland is playing basketball and we're getting to cover him.
I will 100% take you up on Starbucks and steak dinner. Absolutely. I am now completely invested in all Ron Holland stock going to the Thunder. Yeah, I mean, one, because I think that would be a home run pick for the Thunder. Two, now actually the one is for the steak, honestly. Two, it would be a home run pick for the Thunder. My priority is the steak now, honestly.
But that's a very good priority to have. I would just love the fit for Ron Holland. Where are you at on Cody Williams? A very interesting prospect. I think like people do him a little bit of a disservice by just like casting him off as like, oh, well, the only reason the Thunder would like him is because he's Jada's brother. Like, no, he's actually a really talented prospect who, yeah, like you can look at certain stats in certain film where he doesn't look that good, but he was also battling injuries all year long. I would really like that pick for the Thunder. I think that whenever you look at the projections and you look at big boards and you look at mock drafts and everything else, it almost seems likely, crazy enough, that like one of Holland or Cody Williams is going to fall to the Thunder's range, whether that's 10. I would consider the Thunder's range like getting back up to 10 like they did last year, to 12, somewhere in there. I think that one of them will fall to that range. Like, where are you at on Cody Williams?
So I am actually, the last couple days, I've been deep diving into Cody Williams. I've always liked him for the Thunder. Obviously, the vibes with J-Dub would be great. But Cody Williams was a top 3 projected guy for a long time for a reason. I mean, he's a 6'8" player who plays good defense, high IQ, high work ethic, like all the character values that the Thunder, highly rate. Cody obviously has all those, but he still has a lot of potential. Obviously, it was a small sample size, but he shot over 40% from 3. He finished at the rim really, really well. He's versatile. And so I've been diving into his stats, and his pre-injury and post-injury stats are like night and day. Like he just tried to play through that injury when he came back, that ankle injury, and it tanked his stats. If you looked at the pre-injury stats, which I'm about to actually tweet this out because I went through it all and looked at it all, Cody's numbers are really, really good. He's really efficient. Some people say he's not aggressive, but he had a couple of other NBA type players like Tristan Da Silva is on his team. Like they've got other guys on this team that are going to be in the NBA. And when he came back, yeah, he wasn't as aggressive, but he was playing through injury. I really, really like Cody. And honestly, I was very tempted to say Cody Williams. I just don't think that he's going to fall to 12. Now, I do think that they could trade up to get him. Maybe like you saw Cason Wallace, if he's there at 9 or 10, absolutely. I think they could trade up for Cody. I would love to see it. But good for Cody and for the Williams family. I think that he's going to go higher. Like he was projected high. Then everybody's saying he was slipping to the late lottery. Now he's projected, top 10 again. So hopefully for Cody, that happens. Hopefully for the Thunder, he falls to 12.
Hopefully. We'll see. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. There are 2 other big men that we have to talk about, though, or else the comment section will be on fire. Probably already are because we haven't talked about them yet. Number 1, Zach Edey. Like, where do you fall on the most polarizing prospect in this draft?
I get it with Zach Edey. I think that Zach Edey is going to be a really nice bench piece for some team. I think that he's going to be a great paint protector. I think that he'll be able to score at the rim. And I think that his combine did show that, maybe we were kind of underrating him, that he's a little bit more athletic and a little bit quicker than we thought. But for the Thunder in particular, I don't see it because they want to play 5 out. I don't think that they want to change that philosophy, even with a backup 5, because they're going to stagger their guys. Shea's going to play with those backup 5s. J-Dub's going to play with those backup 5s, even if it's just 12 to 16 minutes a game. They also want their 5s to be able to switch on the perimeter and defend. And even if he's a little bit quicker, more athletic than we thought, I don't think Zach Edey's that guy. I think that he's going to be a nice player, just not for the Thunder.
I would totally agree with that. I think that he can be productive in the NBA. I would very much be shocked if it was with Oklahoma City. Cal Popowski of Duke. Do you have any thoughts on him? I think that at one point in the cycle, he was very much mocked to the Thunder. Now his stock has seemingly cooled off from that 12 range.
Yeah, I mean, I get it a little bit more with Flip because he is, in theory, a dribble, pass, shoot, big, but he's just kind of decent in all of those things. Like, he's not a true shooter. He's not like a true creator as a big, and he's not a true defender. He's not a true, like he's pretty good at all those things. So I could see it. Like, if it happened, I wouldn't be shocked. I would get it. But I don't think that's exactly what the Thunder are looking for. I don't think that there's any of those, qualities where he's going to be like elite at any of those things. Again, I think he'd be a nice bench big, but I don't see it happening with OKC at 12.
And you know me, you know that Devin Carter would be a name that I love. Obviously, this Caruso trade changes it a bit. I also love Tidjane Salaun, and I think that it's another prospect who Thunder fans are unfairly evaluating, of like, they just blanketly look at him and say, well, that's just Ousmane Dieng. He is very far away from Ousmane Dieng, of like, this guy is the ultimate competitor, ultimate aggressive guy, ultimate motor. He mixes it up on both ends of the floor. He's going to be on Monday's all juice team for this year's NBA draft. So that's very exciting. I'm in. How much are you in on Tidjane?
I'm about 75% in. I would completely get it if the Thunder take him. And he makes sense. I mean, he's a huge wing. I get the Oos comparisons. He is, like a little bit more raw. But like you said, the big difference between him and Oos is his motor. He has got an incredible motor. He wants to dunk it on everybody. Like, the one thing about Oos is you want him to be more aggressive. But like, the physical tools are there. He probably wouldn't play this season, but anybody that they take in 12 may not play much this season. And that's kind of the benefit of having a win now contender and having all that cap space. You can go out and get like a backup big that's going to play this season. You don't have to have a guy. Now, if like DaRon Holmes was picked, I could see him playing right away. Like, he's ready. But with like Tidjane Salaun, I can see him kind of playing in the G League, maybe playing some spare minutes like we saw with Ooze. But I like him, and I get it with him. I really do.
Yeah, I think that the argument for taking him would be you would be able to invest in him in the blue. And, when you're barring that Holland slide, barring that, I'd even say Cody Williams, slide and figuring out how to get him, like, barring those guys, the odds of the number 12 overall pick having a high degree of impact on an already 57-win team who just added Alex Caruso and still has room to add actual NBA players, like the odds of having to lean on that pick this year is very slim. So you can take this swing and have this great potential down the road whenever. I think that everyone would pretty well, after you just move on from just the lens of the draft, you'd rather see the Thunder upgrade their roster with NBA talent, even something to the like of like Jalen Smith or Dorian Finney-Smith, one of those two guys, than fully casting it all on the total overall pick. So I know that like people will shudder over a projected prospect, but I think that one, he's closer to NBA ready than Oos was at that point in the draft, which is fine. And two, you wouldn't want that anyway. You would not want to just say, okay, the only moves that the Thunder made this year were Caruso and the 12th overall pick in a bad draft, like in a perceived bad draft. So I'm not out on a project by any means. I'm hoping that Saturday, me and you spend a lot of time together at the intro presser, at the steakhouse, everywhere in between. Brandon, let them know where they can find all your stuff. And if you have any more draft takes you want to get off your chest, you have the floor.
Okay. Final draft takes. My guys, DaRon Holmes, Cody Williams, Ron Holland, and Topic. I would not be shocked to see Topic if he's there at 12, like the value with him, and you could just redshirt him kind of like you did with Chet Holmgren. So I'm just going to kind of put a pin in Topic if he's there. That's all I'm saying. So you can find me dailythunder.com. You can find me on the franchise in Oklahoma City radio and KRF radio in Oklahoma City as well.
And where can they find you on Twitter?
Oh, yeah. You can find me at Brandon Rahbar. That's Brandon Rahbar. Good call, Rylan.
There you go. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully, again, the only payback you have to give on Saturday is another podcast should this work out on the Ron Holland situation. But thank you again, Brandon. Until next time, as we're going to do a Cody Williams player profile Be good and be good to one another.